Right, okay, so welcome to my video on my car review on the Golf GTI Mark II. So, I thought I would do a car review on this car purely for the fact I don't see many on YouTube. I'm just going to reverse it. So, I'll try and do my best. This is my first video, so you're going to have to forgive me. And hopefully this video will, your camcorder will keep still. Anyway, I'm rambling on. So my name's Chris, and I thought I love cars. I'm absolutely mad on cars. And I thought I'd do a video on this because I love VWs for a start. And I thought that it would be a good basis to start my car reviews on. Like I say, this is my first one, so I'm no expert. So, Mark II Golf GTI, 1987 Mark II Golf, 8 valve, not the 16 valve, but the 8 valve. I'm going to put it out there and say this car, ooh, I hate to say this, overall is better than a Mark I. No, that's quite controversial, especially that because I've got a Mark I Golf GTI. Now, I love Mark I Golf GTIs, always have done, always will do, die-hard fan, and I might think differently when I get back in my Mark I, but I personally think the Mark II is a better car. And the reason I say that, it's not the quicker car, or feels quicker, there isn't a lot in it, but I like the fact that I use this car every day. Not a single thing falls off of it. I just like the fact that, and it pains me to say this, that the Mark II is just that, the fixtures and fittings, the door cards, for example, on the Mark I, a bit of vinyl with a cardboard on it. It just feels that more usable. It's got better leg room space in the back for the kids to get in. I like the fact that this comes with power steering. Yes, they were slightly heavier than Mark IIs. Well, there's prettier. I think the Mark I's prettier, personally. I just think that they're a more usable car for everyday purposes. And as for the reason I'm doing this video, the overall package of being a good, usable classic car that's going to go up in value, Mark II's the way. Mark I's have risen, don't get me wrong. I think the Mark I's always going to be more desirable because it was the first original hot hatch. But this car, overall, yeah, is slightly better, I've got to say. So, first off, what do I like about this car? It's not quick by today's standards. You've got other things that are quicker out there. But it's just the whole, I don't know, as a kid I remember in the 80s growing up seeing VW Golf GTIs kicking about, and it was, I don't know, I suppose it was, were you buying into the lettering, GTI, what you were saying about yourself? They were iconic, like the E30 M3, E30 M3s and 3 Series Beamers at the time, really. I like the fact that what I like about the car is that you can use it like I'm using now to go and pick my kids up from school. Yeah, I could go out on a track day and still have some good fun. I like the fact that the boot is quite spacious. I've got a load of stuff in there now. If I need to go to the tip, I can put the back seats down, chuck a load of garden waste out. It does all things to everybody, so it's such a multi-purpose car to use. So for that way, I think it's great. I like the little things like the golf ball gear knob here. You know, people say Germans don't have much sense of humour, but I quite like the fact that it really does, you know, things like that come across. Just get through these traffic lights. But I like the fact that I can be driving it 1 minute sensibly, put my foot down. Oh, we've got some power. and it handles really well. For a car of this age, it handles really well. Don't get me wrong, it could do with some new suspension now. I've not got around to doing it, but I just love the fact that this car really does drive really well for the age of the car. And you think at the age of the car, what you could get in 1986, 1987, you know, in comparison, and today in 2017, I'm driving this car. Where's its rivals? The XR3i. When was the last time you saw an XR3i? These survived, and that's what I love about Golfs as well, is the fact that these things survived really well. You know, I love this sort of era of car anyway. 80s and 90s hatchbacks, they were great fun. They still are great fun, and that's why I drive one as a daily car. They're just synonymous for, I don't know, I think it brings you back to your youth, really. The fact that, you know, I'm driving this always makes me remember the 80s, and for me, growing up in the 80s was fantastic. So, you know, jumping in one of these now as a 37-year-old man, it still puts a smile on my face every time I turn the key. It's not the quickest. If it was with my sensible money, I'd have to say, buy a 16 valve. You'd get a little bit more fun out of a 16 valve Golf. I've owned two, and I have to say they were really, really good cars. Different type of style driving. You really have to rev them to a bit like Honda VTEC engine. I always tell people they're a bit like that. Well, you've got to extract the power. Extra power, you've got to rev it a little bit more to get the extra power out of it. Some people think that the 8 valve, it's always been an argument, 8 valves. To be honest with you, I just think it's different driving experience personally. I like the 16 valve, a bit more fun, top end. I think if you put a 2 litre 16 valve in, you've got the best of both worlds. For me, I mean, totally honest, there's only one Mark II that I really should never have let go, and that was my old G60 Edition 1 supercharged Golf. For those who don't know what G60 is, the G-Lader that was sandwiched onto the 8 valve engine. Obviously there's a bit of fettling involved, but 160 brake horsepower standard, which is pretty much the same engine as this, but with a supercharger bolted to it. The Rally's got a very similar engine. Obviously you had 4-wheel drive with the Rally. The CCs were down a little bit compared to the 1781 in an 8 valve. I think that's to do with motorsport homologation purposes or something like that. But in essence, you got an 1800 with a supercharger bolted to it. Still 160 brake horsepower in the Rally. It's the same as the G60 Edition 1 that I owned. Difference being the Rally had boxed arches. And was designed for motorsport. They don't really have a motorsport pedigree. They didn't do particularly well in motorsport. However, there was only 5,000 made, and when you put limited edition numbers in anything, it becomes sought after years down the line. Hence why you're seeing Rallies now going for really good, strong money, which quite rightly so, I think should be the case. Some people like them, some people don't. I'd love one if I could afford one. I can't anymore. It's the car I've always wanted to own. And then on top of that, you've got, I don't know what my camera's doing there, you've got the creme de la creme, the Golf G60 Limited, which was a limited run of 71 hand-built and handover, all 4-door, all left-hand drive, all in the same colour, that like slatey grey black colour. I don't know, I can't remember the colour of the name is. All leather interior, very wolf in sheep's clothing, and a 16 valve G60. So you can imagine that they only built 71 of those, very rare, and the ultimate Golf, some would say, and I'd agree with that personally. But yeah, so my review on the 8 valve Mark II. I like the seating position. I like the fact that I quite like the fact that we've got some dark headlining. My Corrado that I got hasn't got that, and I really quite like that. We've got a tilt and slide sunroof, so we can open that up. Sorry, I said tilt and slide. Sorry, that's my Corrado. I mean sliding sunroof, so we've got the sliding sunroof aspect of things. On a day like today, it's quite nice to have. No electric windows in this. Some of them did have electric windows, but I'm very lucky I've got power steering in this car, which gives it a nice feel, really. You need it, especially when we are parking up, things like that. This car's pretty much standard apart from the 90s period Momo arrows that I've got on it. And yeah, I like the fact that it drives really nice. One of the things I always loved when I was 17, 18 and I bought my first Golf GTI was the MFA trip computer that you have up front, which tells you things like the time of your journey, the miles you've done, the miles per gallon you're doing, oil temperature. And back then, that was something quite sophisticated, really. Today, we get a lot of that in cars. What I like also about this car is I'm now in fourth, put my foot down, the revs build up nicely, now doing 55, 60, 65, 70 miles an hour, and it pulls nicely. And I think that's what a lot of people really liked about the 8-valve Golf, that it had flexibility in that rev range. The 16-valve was a little bit more that you had to knock it back down a gear to get the extra power out of it. 112 brake horsepower with the 8-valve, 139 with the 16-valve. Another thing that I like about Golf GTIs was they lent themselves really well to tuning. So you could gas flow the heads, put a 1900 bottom end in, you know, all the sort of things like exhaust systems, and you could get good horsepower out of them, really. And I think that was half the fun of owning a Golf, is that you had a Golf GTI very understated, still are, but you had a blank canvas to do the tuning on them. And I quite liked that. So people would lower them, and you know, you put nicer wheels on, an exhaust system. The world was your oyster, really, in terms of modifications. Personally, for me, I think with a Golf, I quite like that OEM type look of the factory, with a few sneaky little things put in for good measure. And there was a lot of tuning companies around the time. TSR Performance, which is still going. You had GT Engineering. You had BR Motorsport, and for me, they were, and still always will be, the pinnacle tuners of Volkswagens, really. So GT Engineering was, for me, the equivalent to Alpine for BMW, really. So much so that GT Engineering, I believe, were official tuners for Volkswagen UK. And then obviously on the French market, you had, I think you pronounce it Usinger, or Usinger, and they tuned Mark 1 and Mark 2 Golfs as well, I believe. So yeah, with a overall, in terms of my review, I really do like these cars. I think it proves a point for me personally. People might think I'm boring going for the same car, but I've owned 4 of these things, and I still keep going back for more. I think I'd never get bored of driving the Mark II Golf. I've never really fancied the Mark III. I think the Mark III, I'm going to be totally honest here, I think was a good car, actually. That's, a lot of people would say probably that I was wrong. What I mean by that is that you've got to remember that it was the 90s when Volkswagen came out with the Mark III, so there had to be safety issues, you know, so it was more for the environment, more for the fact that we had to be safe for the environment. We had to strip down cars in a certain time, and things like that, really. So I think, you know, I personally don't think the Mark IIIs are as a nicer car to drive, more heavier weight, but it was a thing at the time. So, you know, ABS came along. That's an ABS pump weighs a heck of a lot if you ever hold one in your hand, whereas the Mark IIs in the main didn't come with ABS. So, you know, unless you bought a G60 or a Rally, that's when it came with ABS. So the 8 valves and 16 valves never had that. You had to have airbags on a Mark III, and Mark IIs never came with that. All these had to wait. So, you know, I think Mark IIIs get a really bad reputation, but actual fact, they're not a bad car, really. In terms of a car, GTI is a different matter, really. I think personally, I think they aren't a GTI, and I think the Mark IV is best. So for me, Mark 1 and Mark 2s will always be the GTIs, really. I'm yet to drive a Mark V, so that's my next goal, and maybe next video is to drive a Mark V. Right, take it easy. I'll speak to you soon.